Greetings one and all, welcome back. This is part 2 of how to remove your motor on the Honda Shadow 1100 motorcycle. And there we picked up with the brake rod we were just finished removing in the last video, and now we're removing these bolts for the subframe. And they are Allen head keys, and I do believe they're 10mm. I will check and be sure on that. And there's two here at the back. I'm going to take both of them out. More on these two subframe bolts. The frame is threaded where the subframe bolts to it, so you don't have to worry about holding the nut at the other side. But that's not true on the ones we will be removing later on here. Okay, and here we're just going to be removing this nut for the motor where it mounts. It's a 14mm. Now it's time to route a chain through the frame of the motorcycle so I can lift it up with my engine hoist and get the front off the ground. I'm going to work it in around and then put a rag here so I don't scratch the frame. Again, it's not my bike. If it'd be my bike, I probably, because you're not going to see it anyhow with the tank, wouldn't be really worried about it. And here I'm just using a 3/8 inch bolt with a washer on one end and put the lather link through the chain, and then we're just going to put a washer and a nut on the other side, and that'll be more than secure to lift the motorcycle. I've pulled motors out in cars with it, and it's not as heavy as that. Okay, now we have the engine hoist as close as I can push it in towards the motorcycle. This isn't the largest engine hoist, but it does the job. Again, a little longer one. There are more heavy duty ones that make it easier, but it'll work. And now we're going to take and lift it up so we can start pulling the motor out. And there again, the bike's supported up in the air, that the motor will freely give out from underneath the motorcycle. Because that's sort of the objective. You're dropping the motor down a little bit and sliding it away from the bike. For right now, I'm happy that's high enough to keep working, and there's no tension against the motor now. I mean, the bike's the weight's off of it. Now we can remove these last subframe bolts, and these do have a nut on the other side. After I get it started, I'm going to have to hold the other side with the wrench to break it free. And to keep it organized, I'll turn the nut on a couple threads and throw it in my bucket with stuff that's coming off the bike. And then we'll get the last one of these subframe bolts. Indeed, this one was extremely tight. Probably, and I'm not sure, the signs are not on it there. They might have been Loctite from the factory, but anyhow, we got it broke free, and it's turning out. And even if it would snap, again, it's a nut and bolt. It's not like it's threaded into the frame itself. Yeah, it would be hard to get one with an Allen head, but you could always, I'm sure, find a bolt that would work in it. And there it's out. Now just again, as I did the last time, turn the nut on a few threads to keep it organized. And now we're going to remove the shift linkage. And as you see, that was simple. One bolt to remove, and it slid right off the shaft, so that was no problem. Now we're going to remove the left front foot peg, and this upper bolt is a 12mm. Okay, and that takes care of the left front foot peg and the gear shift linkage. Now there's another bolt here before we can get the subframe the whole way out to remove. And now the subframe, you actually heard it moved a little bit. We can just lift it out of the way with the horn attached, and we're getting very close to being able to get the motor out. And then we're going to get this spacer and this long bolt to, like I say, one of the motor mounting locations. And now we're going to unhook a coolant hose. I'm using my long needle nose pliers to slide back on the clamp and a regular pair of pliers and see if I can break the grip free so the hose will slide off. I don't have any new hoses. I'm not planning on buying new hoses for it. If you were buying new hoses, you could just take and slice it with the knife. And then I got that. It started to move back and forth. See if we can get it to slide off. It's been pretty contrary. I'm sure it hasn't been off since the bike was built. Yeah, the one reason cousin don't really want to spend more money on it than what's already been spent on all the necessary repairs. And two, the worst thing on parts on these motorcycles, it's not that easy to just find them. As you have to order everything, deal with online dealers, and luckily I'm not going to have to order the hose. It's going to come. And now we're going to do the one at the front head, since we got the one at the rear head taken care of, the hose. There we go. Okay, now we're going to take and remove the battery. One, I should have done this earlier, but now it's sort of an essential thing because we're going to soon be removing the starter. And then number two, I want the battery out of the way so we can unhook more wires to go between the engine and the wiring harness that was underneath the seat. So it's sort of two reasons that the battery needs removed at this time. And the whole battery removal, which is one of the, again, I mentioned earlier, is all 10 millimeters from the terminals to the bracket hole down. The 10 millimeter will take care of it, and there's the battery out of her way. And now I'm going to take and loosen this cover between the motor and the frame of the bike. We're not going to, you can't get it out completely with the motor there, and it doesn't have to go, but just for clearance to route some wires out through it there. Okay, and I'm going to remove the one starter bolt, which is actually, besides the bolt where it holds the starter, it's the ground clamp. The starter don't actually have to come off the whole way, but it's sort of a combination. This bolt does hold the starter plus this ground wire. And you can see now why I loosened that cover between the motor and the frame. That since that wire, that ground wire, run underneath of it, with that loosened, it gave it freedom of movement. And if you notice, taking that bolt out, I had to use a ratcheting wrench. There wasn't a lot of room. And this, I'm just going to, the starter wire itself, just use the open end of this same ratcheting wrench until the nut gets loose, and then it should not take much, and it'll just turn off by using my actually fingers, and there it comes. Now that we have the starter wires and we're over on the right side of the bike, I'm going to unhook the ignition pulse generator wire. There it is up there. It's the white plug-in, and it's got the little just push down on the clip. I'm trying to hold the camera and do this. Now I put the camera down, and there, that's unplugged. And then just again we'll pull it down out of from where it hooked, because again that's going to just come with the engine. That has to be free of the frame and everything, or again it would hang up when it comes time to actually go pull the engine. And now back to the left side of the bike. Here's a wire clamp that can be reused if I'm using this little wire hook to disengage it. And here's more wires. There's a master plug-in here under the seat under this rubber cover. I'm going to just end up unplugging all of these, and they're all color coded. You're not going to mix them up. Okay, now we have these all unhooked. The access to, which is all we need, is the wire that goes for the neutral light on the, again, which is underneath the cover on the left side of the bike. And there it is, we located it. Now we're going to take and get this wire out of from the bike so it'll remove the engine. This again is for the wire for the neutral light. I would assume, because it does go underneath the cover where the gearshift linkage is, and just route it down. It's a tight fit with everything. There we have it down from there, and then just one more place it routes in behind the frame and the ignition switch, and then we'll soon be here. It'll be free and it'll work, pull the motor from the bike. And I'll just take it and tuck it out of the way, and we'll proceed to work. Now there's one more place. We still have one place the wire's plugged in, and this I'm just pulling on it to see where it does go up above, and there it is. It's actually two separate connectors, but their wires are the same color. That I'll be able to keep them straight, and just pull the one apart and the other one. They're a little bit stuck, but they're okay. Now we can just, these are going down because of the plug-in smaller, quite a bit easier than that other plug-in, and there, that is taken care of. And now back on the other side of the bike, I'm getting this ground wire and the starter wire back behind this chrome cover between the motor and the frame of the bike, just so it's out of the way and won't get hung up. And I'm even going to temporarily put this bolt back in this cover that we had taken out earlier. Okay, and now we're going to take a rope here, and all these wires, cables, we're going to tie them up around the frame, so again they're not in our way when it comes time. The motor will be soon time to drop out of the motorcycle. Okay, and amazingly I still haven't unplugged the spark plug wires on the right side of the bike, but now it's no better time than ever. Unplug those, and I'm just going to repeat like we did on the left side of the bike and tie everything up out of the way around the frame. Okay, now we're going to take and remove the dipstick so we don't break it. It's just a little whimsical plastic handle that sticks up from it. And now we're going to remove this studs down at the water pump using two nuts. Indeed, one of the nuts you can just use the nut that was on the bike. Now I had to find a second one to make this work. And then we're going to turn the second one on right on top of the first one we put on. And then we're going to tighten them together. With two open end wrenches. Like I say, we'll go and next thing here, once we start tightening, the stud is turning out. And that takes care of the stud sticking out. Indeed, it was threaded in a long ways, but it was recommended to remove this stud before pulling the engine, and I could see it would catch on the frame. And now it's time to support the engine with a jack. I'm using a piece of wood and my floor jack under it, and of course I still have the engine hoist holding the main part of the bike up. And there it is supported. Okay, now I'm going to pump the jack up a time or so. Be sure the engine is for sure supported, and then I'll take and give a few more pumps on the engine hoist and take the tension off of it some more. Again, sort of you work between the jack and the engine hoist accordingly. And now that that's supported, there's where I supported the engine with the block of wood. You see it's on the bottom of the engine, but not touching the oil filter. And now we're going to remove this front motor mount bracket. The two bolts here framed to begin with. Actually, I'm just going to loosen them to begin with. And then we're going to loosen the ones back at between the bracket and the engine before we remove all of them. Make sure once these are loose, the engine isn't ready to fall out or anything, and it don't seem to be. There's not even any. You see how easy the bolt's turning out with my fingers, so there's no tension against it. Oh, and by the way, I don't think I mentioned these on the bike were 14 millimeter. One of again our three popular sizes, and the same deal with the top. But the other one, they're turning out nice and easy. Okay, now that we have that out, now we're going to take and get this one of these rear two motor mount bolts to go basically the whole width of the bike, and that is tight. I had to go get a 1/2-inch drive ratchet to initially break it free, and you see how hard it's turning. And then once we go here a while, it turns out it's just turning on the other side, so I'm going to hold the other side. I can't show you both sides at once. I only have one camera available this day, but I'm holding on the head of the bolt on the left side of the bike while I turn the nut on the right. Anyhow, that paid off. Now it's just a matter of a couple threads. I can turn it off with my finger, the nut. And then we got to get eventually here rid of the bolt, and then we'll go. There's one more down below it, but first we're going to. I can use a punch and a hammer and knock this bolt out of place. And take notice once the bolt started out, there's a spacer that came out, and now I'm going to take and use the punch some more and get the bolt out farther. Okay, the nut up above was 14 millimeter, but now this one's a 17, and this I'm just going right for the 1/2-inch drive ratchet, and that's turning off with no problem at all, and the bolt's not even turning around. I don't have to hold the other side, so that was easier than the upper one. For the moment, I'm just loosening the nut. I'm going to let it on. I'm going to take the jack and drop the motor down here a little bit, make sure everything is loose while that bolt's still in, and you see it's moving. So now we can take and remove the nut the rest of the way and take our punch, and we'll knock the bolt out through. Actually, first I'm going to use the wooden hammer handle so I don't mess the threads on the bolt up. And you see once the bolt started out, the motor dropped down. So now we take our jack, and I'll jack the motor back up a little bit and straighten the motor up so the bolt's not on a bind, so it knocks out easy. Okay, I just removed the bolt from the other side. The motor dropped down, and there's another spacer at the bottom one. And now basically we got to take and work the motor from the drive shaft and let it down some and clear the frame at the front. Sort of a combination effort here. Okay, there the motor's coming down, but you see it's wanting to get caught at the frame. And it's just sort of, again, work back and forth with the jack. If you have to, the engine hoist. And again, that's sort of, I'm free of I know I don't have the camera on the other side. I got free of the drive shaft easy enough. But now, it wants to hit into that frame, so the motor needs to come down to come forward to clear the frame, or I'm pulling it back up a little bit on the jack and fighting with it. Alrighty, now we're virtually clear of the bike, but I still need to get the jack to spin around, and I'm going to take another block of wood. If I would have let go earlier, it wanted to fall, but now we have it. The jack is actually supporting the engine, and I can get the engine hoist is in the way, and the bike's in the way, but again, give it about another quarter of a turn around on the jack. And there we can finally pull it free of the motorcycle. And there it is out of the bike. There's a picture of the motor. And before ending this video, just take and show you another view of the motor. And we're going to take a look around how the bike looks without the motor in the frame, and how the engine hoist was holding the bike up in the air. And that again concludes on pulling the engine on the Honda Shadow. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them below, and please consider subscribing. And we'll see you in the next video. And there's one last look at the motor.